by far the most terrifying allegation was child sacrifice. In times of war, famine or pestilence, the Phoenicians sacrificed their own infant children.
In crises of great danger, it was a custom of the Phoenicians to give freely their best-loved children in sacrifice, as a ransom to the avenging demons. Those given up were slaughtered in mystic rites.
The Phoenicians, it was said, sacrificed their children to appease their bloodthirsty gods, Baal-Hamon and his wife, Tanit. Baal and Tanit took many forms. They could have an animal face or be human. Baal was often represented as a disc and a crescent. His wife Tanit as a triangle with outstretched arms. Some historians believe Baal was the root of the word Beelzebub, who today we associate with the devil. According to the Greek and Roman accounts, the ceremony of child sacrifice began with the parents handing over their baby to the high priest to be anointed with perfume and oils. Meanwhile, the sacrificer, an assistant priest, made preparations for the baby's death. The priest carried the baby at the head of a procession to the sacrificial altar in a sacred precinct known as a tophet. These grinning masks have been found in Phoenician sites. They were probably hung on walls to ward off evil spirits in the next world, but some experts believe they were worn by the parents to hide their grief. Even the Romans, not known for their humanity, claimed to be shocked at a religious ceremony where babies had their throats cut.
They would bring to the altars children whose age evokes pity, even among enemies.
To think that men were so barbarous, so savage that they gave the name sacrifice to the slaughter of their own children.
Some accounts imply the dead baby's face was covered with a grinning mask before it was thrown onto the funeral pyre.
When the flames fall upon the body, the limbs contract, and the open mouth seems almost to be laughing. Thus it is that the grin is known as sardonic laughter.
And the whole area before the statue was filled with a loud noise of flutes and drums, so that the cries of the wailing should not reach the ears of the people.
The blood of the child was collected and used to anoint the altar.
They sometimes sprinkled children's blood upon the altars.
They thus implored the favor of the gods through the blood of those sacrificed.
The quantity and detail of the Greek and Roman accounts of child sacrifice meant that for hundreds of years they were generally accepted as fact. But in the 19th century, historians increasingly began to dismiss these ancient sources as biased and unreliable. It's a debate that has continued to this day. Professor Piero Bartolone has spent years studying the excavations in Carthage. He's internationally recognized as a world authority on the Phoenician civilization.
In realtà il sacrificio probabilmente non è mai esistito, In reality, child sacrifice never existed. It's a tale invented by the many detractors that the Phoenician civilization has had during the centuries. Starting from the Greeks, then the Romans, all the way up to the 20th century.
While it's clear the Phoenicians were not well loved among Greek and Roman peoples, it would be very difficult to just toss aside all of these citations and say they're completely tendentious and have no rooting in actual fact.
The academic debate intensified when archaeologists excavating Carthage uncovered this Tophet, a Phoenician sacred precinct. Underneath these standing stones, similar to gravestones, were thousands of urns containing charred remains of human infants. Many believe this could be the site where the ritual sacrifice of children actually happened.
You might wonder why a sophisticated people, among the most sophisticated in the Mediterranean or even the world at that time, would have indulged in such a barbaric practice of child sacrifice. And I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I do think they did practice child sacrifice on an institutional level.
Professor Larry Stager of Harvard University led the international team that fully excavated the Carthage Tophet in the 1970s.
Oh, here it comes. Okay, maybe I better get a bucket.
The sheer scale of what they uncovered was extraordinary.
We had maybe 20,000 over a 200-year period in ancient Carthage that we would estimate were sacrificed. That's about, 100 per year at least.
So what is this place? Did parents really bring their children here to be ritually slaughtered? Or is there a more benign explanation for the Tophet?
The Tophet is simply a separate place, isolated from the adult cemetery, where stillborn children were buried, or those who died soon after birth. It's important to remember that in ancient times, 7 out of 10 children died in infancy. Of the 3 who survived, only 1 would reach adulthood. So infant mortality was extremely high, and these dead children were buried in an honorable way to appease the gods and to help propitiate another birth.
The Tophet is at the heart of the debate about whether the Phoenicians did or did not sacrifice their children. Is it simply a cemetery for babies who died of natural causes, or is it evidence of something much more sinister?
The archaeology doesn't prove one way or another whether it was actually child sacrifice and then being buried in these special burial grounds, or was it simply children dying of natural causes, being cremated, placed in jars, and buried in these special precincts. It's an arguable question and hasn't been resolved to everyone's satisfaction, otherwise we wouldn't still be arguing about it.
Back in the 1970s, forensic archaeology was in its infancy. But now, new scientific techniques may finally be able to settle the argument once and for all.
What we are able to do today is quite a bit more than we could have done 20 years ago when analyzing what are probably the most important elements of this archaeology, namely the physical anthropology, the bones of the cremated or burnt children.
In the last 3 months, scientists in Britain and Israel have been using cutting-edge forensic techniques to analyze the charred remains of the children buried in the Tophet. The race is now on for a result.